But anyway.
Mm.
Yeah.
That's the nature of what we're living with at the moment, I guess. So,
Yeah, I've just been wanting to revamp my spirituality class. So this afternoon I've sort of been contemplating that and thinking about it based on the interaction. So my question to you is, what do you consider, either yours or in general terms, the core values of life?
Core values.
Yeah, yeah. I've changed it. The question was in my classes, what are the core values of spirituality? And of course, that went off in a direction. Well, what is spirituality? Okay. So I want to lead it in a different direction. I want to be able to say, let's share what you think core values of life are, or your core values of life, and why, what sort of things, and then lead on from that, okay, into another question about that. Do you regard those core values as spiritual values? Okay. And so that would ease into the subject in a whole different way, and bring a different thought pattern to the way I had been doing it. So, yeah, that's.
It's a good question, actually. It's a really good question, because I guess from my own personal perspective, it has me thinking in a couple of dimensions. So when I think about it in the context of not self, if I just use that word, not self, instead of using the word spirit, but just not self.
Right.
Words that immediately spring to mind are generosity, abundance, unity,
Okay.
Inclusiveness, and at the same time, diversity.
Okay.
So maybe it's like diverse but inclusive. Those sorts of terms. But there's a discipline around that of not thinking about self.
Okay. Okay, I go with that. So, what about things like authenticity?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, without doubt.
Yeah.
Truth. That like just
Yeah. Yeah. And how would you, when people in these classes tend to want to bring in the word love, okay, and I'm very happy with that. I don't have a problem. But then I say it's, love of the environment. Then and I sort of turn it into a question, and so that I can get them thinking a sort of the all-inclusive type of love, okay, as opposed to some, religious doctrine of what love is.
It's and again, it's an excellent question, because it's something that you could discuss for hours, obviously, but but love within that not self context is all about a state of being, in my view.
Yeah.
Because even when you introduce the term, I love you, all of a sudden there's conditions attached to it, So
yes, oh, absolutely, yeah. But when I say I just love the environment in my garden, and I love my plants, and that I think brings the thought to something that's more inclusive, and more selfless, I guess. Yeah.
It's hard to describe, isn't it, really, when you start to ponder it. I mean, it's a word that, like lots of words, gets thrown around, left, right, and centre, both as a noun and as an adjective, and
You're right.
all of those things. But when you do start to think about, well, even if you thought about it in the context of God, if you're happy to want to take that leap, so within the context of, say, the Trinity, so with even putting more definition around it, it's really interesting, because then you start to think about directions and modes and things like that. So the Father loved the Son, but the love was, the pathway to that love was the Spirit.
Right.
So all of a sudden it becomes, like a thread that weaves the three to one. So even though they're completely different, that they are still the one. And when you talk about love in that context, it just makes sense.
Right.
That's sort of how the three components interact. So.
Right. Okay.
And I think there's also, one of the contexts is around the physicality. So it's, the non-physical transmuting into the physical, so something that transcends, dimensions in that sense as well. So there's a transcendence around it.
But do you think it's also about if one looks more, because I got one person, maybe her name is Laura, in the class. She was brought up a Catholic, and now she's like anti, and she says, dust to dust type of thing. So if you have somebody, or if you look at it from a perspective of, I didn't say core spirit. Excuse me, let me just drink something. I didn't say spiritual values as I did historically. I said, what are life values? Okay, what are the core life values? So that would basically encompass everybody, those who don't believe in anything and those who do believe in everything. And so the question is really sort of addressed to the individual, saying, what are your core values in your life? Okay, so assuming that they do have core values, and if they haven't, it gives them a chance to think about it. Okay, and so I guess all the types of things that one, like you and I often talk about gratitude and things like that. So there are all those as well that could be part and parcel of how you and I live our lives. Okay, but we probably have slightly different core values, or I don't think necessarily that we do. But I think other people in a group of collective people on 3 different continents, will have different core values. And so, but it's those day-to-day life values that I'm looking from it. When I spoke historically about spiritual values, I was talking about honesty and reality, and as I mentioned now, authenticity and openness is another one. And then you get stuck on the whole love thing, and so that. For me is a whole new way, and I'm pleased I'm thinking this way, but I'm not altogether there yet. I'm still trying to define what those how to approach the core value in order to stimulate the conversation. Because one of the problems I had with the last class is that two people dominated the entire class, and I never got further than the first question. Okay, it was I allowed it to flow and so on.
Did they get into a debate, or were they just?
They were asking each other questions. More so, the one woman who doesn't believe was asking another Indian who's a firm believer. Okay, and he was trying to explain in sort of simple terms what not his religion, but what he sees as spiritual values. Okay, and because she doesn't get believe in God or spiritual values, she was really testing him to the core. So it was quite an interesting interaction between the two of them from an outside. Like I was listening. I mean, I'm the guide. I'm supposed to be conducting this, but they were just on themselves, and so
it's a tricky area in one sense, because people, because they want to defend a position, all of a sudden become blind to what is. But you'd have to think. Well, you don't have to think, but I'm led to think, though, that those who want to passionately argue that there is no God, and those who want to passionately argue that there is a God, are really arguing about the same thing.
Yeah, they are. And so I don't allow that to dominate. I tell them I'm very happy to call a creator or a God, and I have no problem with that, and I sort of very broadly describe what it is in my life. But I'm quite happy if they talk other words and so on. But because most of them talk about the universe and the creator and so on. But let me just change the subject here then slightly, because another way that I'm looking at this is, when people talk about spirit, okay, now you've already mentioned spirit in this conversation, it's a hard to describe force, okay, but that hard to force animates the core of the inner being, okay. So by understanding that, anything that enlivens the spirit, okay, or anything that enlivens us, some sort of action we can say is spiritual, okay. So that many people say they've had a spiritual experience, okay, when they've had deeply moved by certain activities or certain events or personal interactions or moments of profound insight or inspiration. They call that a spiritual moment or a spiritual experience, okay, and I think it is, okay, and so it leads on, maybe talking from the core values of living. Now, yes, we're living and we're having these experiences. We have these aha moments, we have the moments of joy, whatever you want to describe them, and they are spiritual experiences. So I wanted to lead from that into this, and see, if that's a different approach, if that will help everybody understand.
It could do. I mean, the challenge is always going to be, people's perception or what they've been brought up with, or even some for their own personal experiences. But one way of trying to sort of step aside from it is just to, maybe if you look at it, I don't know, I'm just sort of spinning it out here a bit, but maybe if you look at it from a dimensional perspective, lots of these so-called spiritual experiences, I would suggest quite often, are lateral experiences. So something in a horizontal plane. So, I've had this experience. it was outside my level of understanding, but I've had this experience and now it's within my experience, and I may or may not understand it, but it's now in my experience, so I'm able to apply some meaning to it or interpret it or whatever. So a lot of those things, in my view, and a lot of those debates are very lateral debates along the continuum. Like, there's no God at one end, and yes, there is a God at the other end, and where do you lie on that continuum, sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But one way to try and break that line of thinking is to then think about hierarchy. So you're talking about a vertical.
Okay.
A vertical hierarchy. And because when you talk a lot about those traditional, religious or spiritual debates about good and evil, it's always a dualism. So good at one end and evil at the other, or no God and God, or righteousness and evil, and and I don't know if that sort of makes sense. For me, they're all sort of like horizontal arguments. But as soon as you start to take yourself into a vertical, perhaps, context, the labels, in one sense, tend to drop away, because then it becomes a bit, okay, well, what's beyond creation? That's not a horizontal thing. It's a vertical thing. So what's beyond creation? Well, beyond creation is nothing, and nothing is virtually an impossible thing, I think, for humans to conceptualize. But it's nothing. And then, okay, so where do we come from? Well, you step it back whichever way you like, irrespective of which end of the horizontal spectrum you're on. You have to come from nothing. And some will say, like the scientists will say, oh, well, energy just changes its form or whatever. But where's the energy come from? Well, it's always there. Well, so like it's a void. So where did it start? Like,
Yeah.
And even the scientists will tell you now that things like electrons disappear into nothingness and they reappear, and they're here and then they're over there, and all of those sorts of and science and religion are two interesting ways to look at things, because scientists will always dissect to try and bring it down to its elements, whereas a lot of the mystics will go the opposite direction and be all encompassing, encompass the whole of the cosmos, all of creation, that which is within our ability to see and beyond.
Right.
And as soon as you start to talk about that sort of hierarchy, so from the macro even down to the smallest, particle that we know of, you still come up against nothing at some point.
Right.
And then the extra dimension to add to that is that when you say to people, okay, well, what about the internal dimension? Where does that go? Well, and again, it disappears into nothing. It disappears, after years of practice, meditation practice and other practices, it disappears into stillness and silence. So don't even use spiritual terms, so whichever direction you're starting to look at, it sort of goes into those realms. Now, the challenge you're always going to have, though, is that the participants in the class are going to have their own experiences, and some of them will have no doubt have been spiritual practitioners for a long period of their time, and others have grown up in a consumeristic society.
And they have there was one person in this last one it really, her philosophy was, she was saying in the middle of all the sort of interaction and conversation that we were having in the last class, she was saying she believes, okay, that we humans are just an alien experiment. Aliens have put us here, okay, and left us, and watching us to see how we interact with one another and what we do, and that we will just eventually just die away. We're not going anywhere after this life. We just now are an experiment, sort of in a holographic simulation of. And she doesn't believe in God. She doesn't believe in anything else. She just says, this is what it is. And
isn't it funny though how, because when you were telling me about that, it reminded me of another story. There's this guy over in America, and he's been at it for a few years now, but it started off as a joke, and the joke that he started is that from 1958 through to 2009, the American government has systematically been killing birds. I don't know whether you've heard this one or not.
No, I haven't.
Yeah, systematically killing birds, and in 2009 they killed the last bird. But what they've been doing is they've been killing the birds, is they've been replacing them with drones, which have the full appearance of a bird. And so the birds are actually spying on us, and they're just eyes and ears for the government. And so when you see birds sitting on power lines, they're actually recharging their batteries. So this guy's got this big van, and he drives around America, and it's just started as a joke, but it's just gathered so much momentum. He's got all these followers now. So on his van, he's got those spikes on the top of the roof, so the birds can't sit on the roof of his van. And he's got this big on the back doors. He's saying, pigeons are liars. They can't be trusted. Now there's all these people out there sort of saying, "Oh, look, the birds aren't real." So
that's so interesting. No, I haven't heard of it.
It kind of reminds me of, we're just an alien experiment.
Yeah, yeah.
But it's amazing how some of these sort of conspiracy theories and stories, they just gather momentum, and I saw it on the web, so it must be true.
Yeah.
So.
I wonder where she came up with the idea. I mean, it had to be implanted somewhere through something, and when people are in class, you can't actually tell, because a lot of them will not turn their videos on, but they will interact with audio. And you don't know if they've got tongue in cheek or not.
No, that's right.
You can't see their eyes. You can't see what's happening. But this one sounded very serious. That was what she believed in, and I replied to her. I said, it's very interesting that you've arrived voluntarily in a spiritual class. You see. Just wanted to see what it was about, she said. I said, yeah, I know. Welcome.
Yeah. But I think again, just from my own perspective, and arriving at this it's not a destination, arriving at this position after years and years of serious, dedicated inquiry. I mean, it clearly is. It's an individual thing, because we all have our own experiences and our own perceptions and that.
Yeah, yeah.
So that sort of does come down to that position, that is, if you start from if you were asking the question from a position of I don't know, it opens you to make an inquiry. But if your starting position is
this is how it is,
a scripture or a thesis or whatever, then I guess you'll look for evidence to support it, won't you? So.
Yeah.
And it's a fascinating question because, like, sometimes I find, even when I participate in some of those forums, like that gratefulness forum, and if you put a little phrase on there like seeing things as they really are, and sometimes people will comment on it, and those comments are quite often driven from what I believe, rather than just trying to let go of it and just see things as it really is.
But how can you see things as they really are? It is based on your knowledge or your past experience.
Exactly, and that's part of the discipline of it. I mean, if you put a glass of water in front of yourself and just look at the water and just I have no idea what that is, all of a sudden a lot of the labels will start to drop away. Oh, that's water. Well, that's a funny sound that you've just made, but what is it? It's and you can just study it and whether it's a glass of water or a blade of grass or an insect or a person sitting across from you or whatever, if you really ask yourself, what is that? Then you start to notice things about it, but you never understand it. You could never understand it. And for me, like that's the wonder of the creation, is that it's the same amount of attention has gone into the creation of a blade of grass as it has into a human being. You could study a blade of grass all of your life and still not understand what it is. But there's lots of things that we will just say, oh, that's a blade of grass, that's a glass of water. That's, But it's not until you really start to ask yourself, well, what is that? Oh, it's a glass of water. What do you think it is? Yeah, but what is that? And it takes you off a lot of the stuff that language tends to condition you to.
Right. Okay, I see what you're getting at. Yeah. Interesting thought.
And you can ask a scientist, what is it? Oh, well, it's 2 molecules of hydrogen and 1 molecule of oxygen. Yeah, but what is that? Which is your, the Plumstead methodology in action, isn't it? It's like the why. Well, why? Why do you say that?
No, the why is definitely, but coming back to spirituality, coming back to class, coming back to values, and it's interesting to see, the words people put on it, as you've been describing now, on something that is perhaps bothering them. Okay. So they find themselves in a situation where they're happy to voluntarily be in that situation, but they also want to somehow defend where they're coming from. And, as you say, with regards to the scientists, for example, explaining something. And so that's why I want to sort of move the class into a different orientation to avoid those sort of, or make it more inclusive for everybody coming from whatever direction or from whatever background or from whatever conditioning or thoughts. Because I can clearly see people are attracted, okay, and they're coming. And
do you have a sort of a broader objective in mind? Like is like so without putting words in your mouth, but is like the objective of the discussion more one of encouraging people to open their minds?
Yes, no, that's exactly what it is. Okay, that's it. You see, I had one of the Australian guides. We've got two Natalies here that are Australian guides, and the one just does exercises, and she came into the class, and I said, "Oh, I didn't expect you in the class. Welcome." She said, "Just wanted to find out, what Michael is getting on with, getting up to here." You see, so that's great. Okay, and we have a little the 4 guides here. We set up a little Telegram group. Okay, so that we could talk. We get set up, couldn't hear us, right?
Yeah.
And so her comment after the class in there was, "Wow, I didn't expect that." But she participated, and she's also she's not actually sure what she believes. Okay, and so the class made her think. Okay, she said, I don't believe in God and so on, but I certainly believe in a creator. Okay, and so,
and isn't that a fascinating position?
Isn't that absolutely? It is.
There's no God, but there's probably a creator, though.
Yeah, there's a creator. No, there's a creator, and yeah, and so you can't venture into soul, and you can't venture into spirit, and you just say, okay, well, describe how your creator, influences your daily life, and do you want that sort of influence? And how do you behave in order to get that influence?
It's sort of funny, because I was thinking of you the other night because I watched a video with Sadhguru, and he was talking about the whole idea of purpose.
Oh, okay.
And he was talking to a group of North Americans too, which was even more talking about clash of cultures.
Yeah.
And he was just saying, he says, I often hear this term over here about a God-given purpose. He says, but what if God doesn't even know you exist? He's like, I'm not saying this is but possible. and you could come to that, like the cosmos is so huge and we're so small in the overall scheme of things. What happens if he hasn't actually noticed us? So what's happened to your purpose?
Right. It's so interesting. And what was, tell me more. Maybe I should go and listen to it. It sounds interesting.
Oh, I do. Well, I thought it was good too because, and it's sort of topical because I think you've actually run a course on.
Yeah, that was the start of my business class. Remember, some months ago. Yeah. Well, what is your purpose?
Which is a different context, but I mean in the context of purpose in life.
Yeah.
What is your purpose in life? Well, maybe there's not a purpose.
I'm going to write that down because I think I want to see how I could pull that back into the spiritual class.
So maybe there is no purpose. So the whole idea of life is to experience this life as it is, so that, like the analogy might be like, so this experience that you're having right now is a bit like the riverbanks, the life is the water which is flowing through you, so why does that need a purpose?
Yeah.
And then the other questions, when you apply the Plumstead methodology is, well, what happens if you achieve your purpose? What then? What happens next?
Yeah.
And what happens if you don't achieve your purpose? What happens then? So.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I think that's an interesting question for the spirituality class.
Well, it kind of is, isn't it?
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Because what it helps to do is take it out of the abstract and bring it in into some of those more fundamental questions. I mean, and if you've got an audience there which are, 60 years of age plus, then this whole idea of life purpose is one which can be front and center for a lot of people, like I've retired and it's like, now what?
Yeah.
Oh, my grandchildren. Yeah, well, but what's that?
Yeah. Well, it was interesting. I sort of, with the business context of, trying to generate an idea, I called it, and I still do in the class. I call it, ask your subconscious questions, okay, and then wait for the answer, okay, and the answer will come either through intuition, through an aha moment, or you'll wake up, in the morning, and it'll get answers, and but it's so foreign to so many people that come into my class. To give you an example of what is foreign, Get Set Up asked me to do a class, or suggested I do it. I took it last month, and I've just done it this week, and that is demystifying science, mankind on Mars. Okay. So I did that. Okay. And so one of the questions that came up from the class was, are we going to find people on Mars? Okay. So I said, well, in the third dimension, the answer is no, because we can see there are no people on Mars. We've got rovers. China's got rovers. America's got a few rovers. We've got orbiters going around the planet. We can see that there's no, but there could be, and I'm pretty sure there are people in maybe, the 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th dimension. I don't believe in that rubbish, was the reply. Okay. So you've got to be so careful, because there I was mixing up, nothing to do with science that people can comprehend at the moment. Okay. And I'm mixing it up with sort of more a philosophical type approach, or, or maybe call it a spiritual approach. I don't know. But people are quick to hide behind or what their particular belief system is at that moment. Quite happy to hear that there weren't people on Mars. Okay. That wasn't a problem. But to think that, yes, there are probably people on Mars, but we just can't see them. And that was beyond this person. Okay. And I can tolerate those. I can tolerate those sort of rejections, if you like, to something, because I can protect myself. It's when people become personal that I can't handle those sort of things, yeah. So yeah.
I think it's a wonderful thing that you're doing. It really is, because it's a really explicit, safe invitation to go and just explore. People at their very core.
Yeah.
And their very life experience. Without the help of a marketing department, So
yeah. You should, Get Set Up. There are, obviously, about the guides, but there's something called ambassadors. Okay. These are people who don't get paid. Okay. And they just normally a once-off or once a month class on a topic that they love. Okay. And I don't know why it suddenly occurred to me now, but if you're doing this class for the company that you work for, you could probably get through a once-off or or once a month class on Get Set Up on using how to use different woodworking tools. Okay. And
how to bang your thumb.
Oh dear.
And walk away.
How did you manage to do that?
Oh, I don't know. It was just one of those things. But anyway, these things happen.
Yeah, I guess they do. Yeah. And they happen when you don't even think. This morning I was shaving, and I just have I've always had a scraper. I've always just scraped, and that's what I use. And so I was scraping, I was feeling, oh, I've missed some part there. I was probably daydreaming or something. So I take my razor and I pull it, but I don't take my left hand out of the way.
Oh.
So
It's easy to happen, you know. I was talking to a guy on the phone the other day.
Yeah.
Who it was a tragic story, but it was also, he still had a really fierce sense of humour, notwithstanding what had happened. But he was telling me that he was using a table saw, like, you know, so it was table with a saw blade, you know, and he was cutting a piece of like that composite wood, like they call it MDF. So it's you know,
a mixture.
Yeah, and he said he had his hands here, and he had it up against this, they call it a fence, you know, so that you get a straight cut, you know. He said, and I had it there, and he said, and I was watching that it was up hard against the fence, and I was pushing it through, and he cut 4 fingers off.
Oh my God.
And not only did he do that, as soon as he realized what had happened, his other hand came over and he cut this finger off as well.
Oh no. Oh my goodness.
And I said to him, oh, that's terrible. He says, yeah, no, so it wasn't a good look. It's really messy and da 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 da, you know, and I've had all these problems. They've managed to save one and they've done this and done that. And I says, oh, okay. He says, but anyway, that's not the reason I called you. He says, I wanted to know, so I need a new spare part for my sanding machine. It has a conveyor belt and I need a new conveyor belt for it. And I says, oh, okay, yeah, no, I can help you with that. And he says, this is a difficult job to put on. And I just couldn't help myself. I said, no, it's only a 2-finger job. You'll be fine.
You lassie.
And he roared with laughter.
So how many fingers does he have left, you know?
I think he's got 1 on one hand and 4 on the other.
Okay.
So,
yeah.
Be incredibly painful, wouldn't it, though? Just
oh, it gives, just thinking about it gives me the heebie-jeebies. Yeah. Yeah.
But that's the nature of those things, because you actually don't feel it straight off.
Yeah.
It happens just like that, you know. The pain doesn't kick in until you see it and the shock sets in, and then all of a sudden the pain starts to kick in, you know. It's just like
interesting. Yeah. Anyway, maybe we should lose the class now. Lose the conversation. Maybe we've come to a nail-biting end.
I think you're on an important line of inquiry. So yeah, I think, and that's always the tricky thing when you're talking about some of these subjects, is because people may have entrenched views about it, not necessarily based in anything other than that's just what I believe. You know, like it's. And when you invite them to think outside of that belief, it's something that some people just fiercely resist, don't they? You know? So
they do, and that's why I encourage the interaction in the class. Okay, so that I just want to be the catalyst, and then they can hear a number of other people and where they come in from, and hopefully that sort of just keeps the open mind.
I think so too, and as you say, if as the facilitator you sort of say, well, that's a really interesting point of view. Let's hear some other views, you know, and that makes it a safe environment for people to share alternative views rather than getting into, oh, well, that view's right and that's a wrong view, and you know.
I always tell them, I've mentioned this to you before, I always tell them with tongue in cheek, I say, you know, we're not allowed to say we or they, okay? We can only say, I believe in this or that, you know. And then they correct themselves and they find themselves preaching. You say, oops, sorry, Michael, I.
And isn't that a telling thing in its own right, you know?
Yes, it is. Yeah.
Safety in numbers.
So yeah, I want to. I don't know what the attendance. It said I've changed my time. I was getting Americans, sort of in their early evening in September. Then they moved me now to 3 p.m. Western Australian time, and that is like midnight and after for the Americans. So I've lost all those except for one or two who put their alarm clocks on in order to be in the class. Okay.
Are you finding that the Indians are participating in those sorts of classes?
Yeah, not greatly. I mean, virtually the only people I have are Indians, except for the one or two that will put their alarm on. And but they are so entrenched in their historical philosophy that their great-grandparents and them and everybody was brought up in, and so it comes out in almost predictable ways, yeah.
Well, the time's gone fast, hasn't it? We must have had a
we have that
interesting discussion. So
yeah, they're great.
Well, I hope it was of help to you. It might have been of no help at all, actually. But anyway.
It's also just been a very interesting conversation, hasn't it? It really has. And I'm going to bring that purpose back as well. And I'll probably re-listen to this conversation as well when I'm doing the
I'll see if I can track down that video for you and just send you the link about it too, because it might be just something.
No, I would like to, because there are really some topics that Sadhguru, and I mention him often in different classes, not only the spiritual class, and so now I enjoy listening to him. I've also listened to one or two of Alatra just recently.
Someone contacted me the other day and wanted me to participate in one of their, I don't know, round tables or something, but I declined because I actually didn't feel that I had a contribution to make. Yeah, I mean, I didn't really want to participate just for the sake of participation, So I'm happy to participate if I think I can add value, but I don't think I can add any value to what you're doing, so.
Yeah. I've got a class that made me think about Alatra. I've got, in fact, it's coming up. Oh goodness, next week. Yeah, it's one of the things I'm working on now. Is climate change.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, that's really a dominating discussion with them at the moment. So.
Yeah, but it's so diverse. Their sort of people's opinions that are there, and so I have I don't know what your belief is about climate change, but it has, in my opinion, very little to do with carbon dioxide. And that seems to be the main thing that everybody is punting at the moment.
Yeah.
And I know it affects our environment, but is it affecting the climate change? Okay.
Yeah.
And so anyway.
Yeah. I'll just send you this link now. I've just found it. So.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
So it's only like 13 minutes or something. So.
Yeah. Okay. That's interesting. Why? Oh, it came up first across my screen.
Did it?
Yeah, and then now it's disappeared. Maybe it's because I didn't have the chat on. Yeah, and I didn't have the chat thing on, so that's interesting. So what you post, let me just say thanks and see if it comes up on your screen.
No, just over in the chat.
Well, probably because I didn't have the chat open. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah. All right.
Very good. Okay. Well, lovely chatting. And and if
we'll
all things being equal, I'll catch up on the weekend. Eh?
Yeah. That'll be good.
Very good.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks. Great conversation. All right.
Yep.
Bye.
See you. Bye.